Have you noticed how today's tiredness is different from the tiredness of other times? It's not just physical. It's not just your body asking for rest after visible exertion. It's a silent, psychological tiredness that seeps in even on days when almost nothing happened. An exhaustion that arises without warning while you're standing still, sitting, seemingly safe. Something inside you doesn't slow down. Something insists on remaining alert. And perhaps the conflict isn't in what you did, but in what you never stopped thinking about. You're not tired because you did too much. You're tired because you thought too much. And even if it's not yet obvious, your body is trying to warn you. This warning doesn't come in clear words, but in subtle signs. Tension in the neck, shortness of breath, restlessness without reason, difficulty being fully present. The mind remains active, running through scenarios, anticipating problems, revisiting past decisions, creating imaginary futures that may never exist. Meanwhile, the body remains there, receiving each thought as if it were a real event. There is an invisible problem in contemporary human experience. The modern mind lives in a constant state of alert, even when the body is at rest. It's a practical and profoundly psychological paradox. You may be outwardly silent, but internally there is noise. An incessant flow of stimuli, worries, comparisons, notifications, expectations. The mind has been trained not to rest, and what should be a conscious tool of perception has become an automatic survival mechanism. The mind wasn't made to process endless notifications, nor to sustain future worries all the time, much less to continuously measure itself against the lives of others. Yet that's exactly what happens. Thinking has ceased to be a one-off act and has become a permanent state, a constant background noise, a noise that doesn't stop. And when thought becomes noise, it loses clarity, loses purpose, loses awareness. It no longer guides, it only occupies space. From a practical standpoint, the body doesn't understand abstract thoughts. It doesn't distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. For the nervous system, imagining a problem is almost the same as experiencing it. Every thought laden with fear, anxiety, or anticipation activates the same internal defense circuit. The body reacts as if something were about to happen, as if it were necessary to prepare, flee, resist, even sitting down, even at rest, even in silence. This is the point where the psychological meets the biological. Excessive thinking translates in the body as a danger signal. The nervous system remains in constant vigilance. There is no true pause, only brief intervals between one alert and another. Breathing adapts, muscles contract, attention becomes fragmented, and little by little, the body begins to carry a weight that is not physical, but is real. There is something profoundly philosophical and poetic in this. The mind races, seeking control, predictability, answers. The body, on the other hand, simply feels. It doesn't argue, doesn't rationalize, doesn't negotiate. It responds. And in this silent dynamic, the body ends up paying the price for a mind that never falls silent, a price that manifests as fatigue, diffuse anxiety, a feeling of always being behind in life. Perhaps you've felt this without knowing how to name it. That feeling of being in flight mode, even when there's nowhere to run. An internal state of constant readiness, as if something important is always about to happen, but never does. This continuous tension doesn't arise from nothing. It's built up thought by thought, day after day, so subtly that it becomes normal. And it is precisely here that the story begins to deepen. Because if the mind never falls silent, there is a reason. And if the body is paying the price, there is a hidden message in this discomfort. Before seeking quick fixes or superficial answers, perhaps it is necessary to look more consciously at this internal conflict that almost no one notices, but almost everyone experiences. And that is what we will begin to reveal next. When the body starts to scream, almost no one hears it immediately. At first it whispers, a slight discomfort, a tension that seems normal, a pain that you explain as posture, age, the day's stress. But the body doesn't speak by chance. It manifests exactly what the mind can't stop. Everything that wasn't felt, everything that was pushed aside, everything that was over-rationalized finds a way out. And that way out is often physical. There's a very common misconception in how we deal with the psychological and practical aspects of modern life. We believe we can solve everything by thinking better, organizing more, controlling more. But the conscious mind, when it enters a constant state of war, loses its ability to listen. It becomes too noisy to perceive what's happening inside. And it's at this point that the body takes on the role of messenger, not because it wants to interfere, but because it needs to be heard. Constant tension in the shoulders, jaw, and abdomen, pains that arise without apparent cause, tests that show nothing, but the discomfort persists, a profound fatigue that doesn't go away with a night's sleep, a silent anxiety that doesn't explode in obvious crises, but remains there, like a permanent emotional background. These signs are not random. They form a language, a body language that speaks of undigested emotional overload. And it's important to say this clearly. It's not weakness. It's not a lack of mental strength. It's not a lack of discipline. It's excess of stimulation, excess of thought, excess of internal demands. Emotions that weren't felt at the right time don't disappear. They accumulate. And everything that doesn't find space in consciousness finds space in the body. The body speaks when the mind refuses to listen, and it speaks in the only way it can. From a conscious point of view, this completely changes how we perceive symptoms. They cease to be enemies and become signs. Each pain carries an unanswered question. Each tension points to an internal state of resistance. Each extreme fatigue reveals a mind that finds no rest, even when the external world slows down. The body does not create suffering without reason. It reacts to an internal environment that has become hostile. Many people try to solve this by resting their bodies, but keeping their minds at war. They lie down, but continue thinking. They stop physically, but don't stop internally. External silence doesn't produce internal silence when the mind remains trapped in the past or the future. And that's why, often, rest doesn't restore. Because the problem isn't just in doing, but in continuous thinking, in a psychological state of alertness that never switches off. There is something profoundly philosophical and minimalist in this process. The body lives in the now. It only recognizes the present. The mind, however, wanders, revisits, anticipates, imagines. When the mind strays too far from the present, the body tries to pull it back through sensation. Pain, discomfort, and fatigue are anchors. They are attempts to bring attention back to the here and now, not as punishment, but as an invitation to awareness. Silencing in this context doesn't mean forcibly stopping thinking. That only generates more conflict. Silencing is returning to the present. It's noticing your breath, the weight of your body, your internal rhythm. It's reducing the noise so that perception becomes clear again. When the mind slows down, the body doesn't need to scream. When attention becomes more conscious, symptoms lose their function as a constant alarm. But before that silence happens, the body insists. It increases the volume of the message. What was discomfort becomes pain. What was tiredness becomes exhaustion. What was mild anxiety becomes a constant feeling of inner tightness. Not because the body is broken, but because it is being ignored. The body doesn't break down out of nowhere. It gives up little by little when it realizes that speaking softly wasn't enough. Perhaps as you listen to this, some part of your body is reacting. Maybe you recognized a symptom, a sensation, an internal state that seemed too normal to question. If this resonated with you, write the word present in the comments. Or comment, "My body speaks," if any of these descriptions sounded familiar. This helps raise awareness and also shows me that you are truly living this experience, not just hearing about it. And let me ask you something, without rushing. When was the last time you were truly present in the now, without anticipating the next step, without mentally reviewing the past? If this question resonated with you, comment silence, or write a short sentence that represents how your body has been feeling lately. It can be just one word. Sometimes, naming it is already the beginning of listening, because all this we're talking about isn't about eliminating thoughts or escaping the mind. It's about understanding why it doesn't stop. It's about realizing what's being avoided, what's not being felt, what's been pushed aside in the name of productivity, adaptation, emotional survival. And the closer we get to that point, the clearer it becomes that tiredness isn't the final problem, but the initial sign of something deeper that still needs to be addressed.